Thank you so much, everyone, for welcoming me. And Melinda and Lynn, I've known Melinda. I met Melinda at the very first focusing summer school in 2006. The only person I knew at the summer school was Kevin McKevenue. I'd been working with him by phone, oh my goodness, back in the dark ages, by phone for a couple of years, and got to go to this extraordinary event that Melinda, most significantly Melinda, had organized. There were 120 people at the first summer school. And it was the first time in my life that I felt that I was part of a community, even though I didn't know anybody there. My first experience of whole body focusing came about, maybe in a way that comes about for many of us. At the time, in the early 2000s, I was working as an Alexander Technique teacher and was collaborating with an osteopath. We had some shared clients together, and I was also one of his clients. And one day he stood in front of me. He had a very strange sense of personal space. He stood right squarely in front of me, close to me, with his arms down by his side. And he said, "There's this guy, Kevin, coming down here from Toronto to do a workshop, and you need to do it." And since he'd never spoken to me in that way, I understood I needed to do it. So I went to the weekend workshop. And at the time, I guess I was about 5 or 6 months into a process of vision therapy. I have my eyes and my brain probably always had dysfunctions that became huge about 2 years before this time. They don't see the horizon at the same level. They don't converge and diverge organically. They don't track, which is not only in reading, but in just looking around. And I can't remember what the fifth category was. Anyway, I'd been going to vision therapy 2 or 3 times a week and was beginning to learn how much more dysfunctional my vision was than I'd even realized when the testing was first done. And I was in a workshop with, I don't know, 10 other people. None of us knew anything about focusing. None of us knew anything about whole body focusing. Anyway, in the afternoon, after lunch, we went outside. It was a beautiful day out in the country. And we did the approach exercise, which you and a partner, and I was familiar with the man who was my partner in that activity, but we didn't know anything about each other. So he was standing at a distance from me. And the idea, in order to get an experience of felt sensing, was invite your partner to start walking towards you. And if at some time you feel something within you, you can stop him. Well, he was walking towards me and everything was fine. The sky was blue. There weren't any clouds. There were massive trees. It was gorgeous. He was coming and walking, and we're both smiling at each other because this was a lovely activity together to be doing outside. And he got about, I would say, 1.5 meters away from me, maybe 4+ feet from me. And all of a sudden I had to stop him. There was a in my body. Well, that was curious. So we both waited, and I gestured him to continue. And he came a bit forward, and I had to stop him again because there was that inside me. And we waited, sort of smiling goofily at each other because we didn't understand what was going on. And when I felt ready, I gestured for him to come close to me, to come towards me. And as he came within this distance, the sky and the trees and the house, everything came at me at the same time. And it was in that moment that I understood this is how my brain is seeing most of the time. And no wonder I'm exhausted most of the time, because I'm having to work so hard to compensate for that, work so hard not to see, not to experience the world in this way. So that was a weekend workshop. I went into this studio teaching Alexander technique on Monday morning. And at that time, everyone who came to me had been with me for 2 or 3 years. So we knew each other. We had deep relationships. And I knew that I didn't know what I was going to do, but I couldn't possibly do and proceed the way I always had before. And it was the most amazing thing. With each client, it was like popcorn, what had happened to them. The ones who came to me because they had musculoskeletal issues discovered new ways of moving and new ways of experiencing their physical bodies. And the others who came understanding the mind-body experiencing of Alexander technique were discovering things in themselves and sharing those things with me that they never had before. It was astonishing for all of us. We recognized that. Many years later, I was at one of the international congresses giving, I had a 45-minute offering of whole body focusing. And on that day, that particular day, there was a group of PhD psychology students from a college in the San Francisco Bay Area who had come to the international and were participating in various sessions. I had 2 of them in my session. So I gave an attunement, experiential, and after the attunement, one of them raised her hands and said, this is all very nice. This is very interesting. But most of our clients are people who do not have homes, people who are living on the streets, and they need to have very concrete information offered to them. Okay. But they continued and we participated and we had our 45-minute session. And 2 days later, I sent an email to everyone asking, I'm just curious, how is this living in you? And one of them responded like within 37 seconds to say she had just had a session with one of her clients, a woman who was sitting with her legs crossed and her body tightly wound up and crunched down in her usual way, her breathing very high and short. And the therapist didn't say anything, didn't use any of the language that I'd offered in the whole body focusing session. But in the course of her session with the client uncrossed her legs, gradually began sitting more upright. Her breathing became expansive and whole. And the therapist said something changed in the therapist-client relationship that had never happened before. And this was, I don't remember how many years after my own first experience with Kevin. Oh, about 12. And from hearing her explanation of what had happened in the session with her client, I suddenly understood that she, the therapist, something in her had become transformed. And without her consciously knowing about that, whatever was in her bodily self was communicating, sharing something with her client that affected her client in this positive way that opened up what became more possible in the therapeutic session. So I want to step back from that, feeling like, oh no, I've just walked into a huge hole. All of these wonderful people who are helpers gathering here today, I don't want them. What if they don't experience a transformation like this? Oh gosh. And then because you're helpers, you experience, it's within you, it's part of your training, it's part of your experiencing that we have no guarantees of what will come about in one session. We don't have any guarantees of what is possible to come about in a number of sessions. And whole body focusing, my practice of whole body focusing has just metaphorically tapped me on the shoulder to bring me more fully into my bodily self. So I wonder, before, what I'd like to do is to offer an attunement, a meditation, however you choose to think about it or to name it. But before that, I wonder if anyone has any questions or comments, observations you'd like to offer. And somebody else will look at the screen to see if there are hands raised that I'm missing.
You can just unmute yourself and speak out.
Yeah. Oh, this is lovely. And the lovely that I'm experiencing is the presence and the wholeness of this entire group here together. And I'd like to invite you to, however it is that you're sitting, I'd like to invite you to place your feet on the floor. And I'm going to set my timer just so I can keep track of things in a different way. My stopwatch. Yeah. So here we are together, each of us having an intention not only of placing our feet on the floor, but offering an invitation to ourselves to let our feet meet the floor. And in allowing my feet to meet the floor, I'm allowing my whole self to know that the floor is meeting my feet. And if each of us was just skeleton person, no muscles, ligaments, or tendons, soft tissue, I'd like to invite you to begin sensing that support comes from the ground up into us. Support coming from the ground up into my feet and flowing from my feet up and into my low legs. The support flowing up and up and up, coming to the curve at that place we call knee. Support continuing to flow through the large bones of our thighs. That support flowing up and up and up, arriving into the structure of my pelvis, which is connected with the structures of my spine. And that support from the ground continues flowing up my spine, coming up into each bony chunk of vertebra, like a fire brigade, delivering support up to the next, support up to the next, continuing up. And when this support arrives in the area of our ribs, something about that support gives more freedom to move to the whole structure of the ribs, so that the exquisite dance that ribs and lungs do can continue in its own free way. And as that dance continues, the support from the ground up through my bony structure continues up and up, up into the area of throat and neck. Support continuing up into this magnificent dome of our skull. And just place your hand on the top of your head for a moment. And there you are, meeting the floor. Your feet are meeting the floor is meeting your feet, support is coming up. And even though we don't actually feel it, that support is coming up into your skull. And you can let your hands rest down. So here we are, feet meeting floor, floor meeting feet. And as the support continues moving up, if you think architecturally, you want to hope that the people who constructed the building you are living in understood the principles of physics, that the support that goes up needs to be able to meet the force coming down. So here we are, letting the support continue coming up as you begin thinking of the roots. If we were trees, we would have a long, strong mother root that goes down into the earth deeply. We would also have vast systems of roots branching out in all directions, unfurling, uncurling, reaching into the earth for nourishment, reaching across to other trees to be in communication with each other, to provide support. Now, if in addition to my root system going down into the ground, I had roots coming off my back body, uncurling into the space behind me, from the back of my head, tendrils of my root system extending into the space behind me, from the back of my neck, my root system unfurling, uncurling into the space behind me, from the sides of my shoulders, extending, coming down my back, the area of my shoulder blades, those wings, the roots continuing to allow themselves to extend behind me, into the space behind me. Coming down my back body, below my belt line, extending. My root systems are very strong. They can reach through the chair that I'm sitting on, reaching behind me, coming down my buttocks, the backs of my thighs, moving down and down, the backs of my knees, my root system extending back, coming down my low legs and down to the area that we call ankles, however it's called in your language. Coming down to my feet, hello feet. My back body extending its sensing mechanisms into the space behind me. And I can let my root systems come in the front of my body, my forehead, extending forward, coming down to the sockets of my eyes, my cheeks, my chin, under my chin, my throat, my root system sensing itself forward from my throat, my upper chest, the ribs in front of my body, my breasts, my stomach, coming down, my belly. Here I am now, me, here, now, supported from the ground and sensing into the space that surrounds me. Top of my head, front of me, behind me, my feet, the root system below the ground. Me, here, now, like a vast satellite dish that is receiving and sending. So we have nerve endings throughout our bodies. And we can invite them to continue awakening into the space around me so that I can experience the support that comes from this space around me. Me, here, now. Present to myself just the way I am. Present from myself just the way I am. And I invite you to allow this direct experiencing of your bodily self to continue. Jean wrote, "Your physically felt body is in fact part of a gigantic system of here and other places, now and other times, you and other people, in fact, the whole universe. This sense of being bodily alive in a vast system is the body as it is felt from inside. Me, here, now, just the way I am." Kevin, in a session I had with him last week, said about himself, "I can pick it up in my own body, that which I, Lynn, was experiencing in my body." He said, "I can pick it up and then can support it. That's what it means to be heard. And something opens up in you. Life in you is opening up. I feel that, and in turn feel heard inside of me, Kevin. There's a mutual expansion happening." So as we move into breakouts of 3 people, except for those of you who need to dash off, when you're together in your trio, and I like using the musical term rather than the psychological term, because in a musical trio, everyone is listening to and responding to and with everyone else. So as you're in your breakout, I invite you to listen. I always do this, and I realized I have a dear focusing partner in Japan who doesn't have a cultural context for what this gesture means. I invite you to listen from the vastness of your big satellite dish, receiving. And when you speak, speaking from there. To play with that, and to play with the direct experiencing of me here, now, just the way I am. Does anyone have any questions before we go off into the breakout? Just unmute yourself if you do.
questions or comments or whatever is there for you.
Right.
Thank you, Lynn. I was wondering if there was something more than, it's funny to say something more than the whole big satelliteness of this receiving that you wanted us to discuss or to tune into while we're in our breakouts, trios.
And I'm thinking. And I've just closed my eyes as I think. And what's extraordinary is that my feet are buzzing as I'm experiencing, feeling the connections of all of us here. And that is giving me support and maybe also, I would say, some confidence to respond to you, Jonathan. And I believe the answer is no. that the only thing, the all thing that I would like you to directly experience, each of you and the three of you together, is how is it for me when I listen, when I take you in, when I receive you from the all of me? And how is it when I speak from? How is it when the words come from within my bodily system, which is my physical body, the envelope of my skin, my physical body, and the more inside and the more outside. That was a lot of words. Thank you, Jonathan. Anyone else? Elizabeth.
Lynn, a couple minutes ago, you told us something that Kevin said the other day, and it started with, I can pick it up in my own body, and then I can support it in you. And then there was a second part, and then after that you said there's a mutual expansion happening. Can you remind me, because I was so excited to hear it, I couldn't catch it all.
Right.
I can
Right.
pick it up in my own body, and then I can support it in you. And what was the next part?
That's what it means to be heard.
Thank you.
And then something else opens in you, the
Yes.
one who is being heard. Life
Right.
life in you is opening up. I, Kevin, the so-called listener, I feel that. And in turn, I feel heard inside of me.
Right.
And that is the mutual expansion happening.
Wow. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm so glad you asked to have that repeated so that we could really take it in more. So much about being an us and the listening and speaking as a mutual process.
Yeah. I hate to say it, but I wouldn't even mind if you read it again. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'd like it put in the chat. If someone can type it up, thank you.
That'd be nice.
If I put it in the chat when we're in the breakout, will that work? Or when we come back, or
No, it will not show up.
it won't show up. Thank you, Matano.
Thank
Thank
you,
you,
Maritana.
Matano. I'll read it again. Wow, I really.
You could type it somewhere, anywhere while we're in the chat and then paste, while we're in groups and then paste it into the chat when we come back.
Ah, and then it can be shared afterwards for anyone
Yeah.
who left. Thank you. So let's, each of us, all of us, because we are no longer each of us, boom, 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 little pictures. We are we are in this unique relationship, grounding, letting our root systems sense into the space around us. Kevin speaking. I can pick it up, that which I, Lynn, was feeling within me. I can pick it up and then can support it. That's what it means to be heard. And something opens up in you when you are heard. Life in you is opening up. I, Kevin, feel that, and in turn, feel heard inside of me. There's a mutual expansion happening. So when you're in the breakout, this is a funny thing to say. Perhaps you can think in the breakout, well, this is all about me. This is all about my body grounding, extending into the space, receiving the space. As I'm hearing you, and when I speak, this is also about me, grounding. I like to say grounding, it's active, it's ongoing, not merely grounded. Grounding, presencing from me here, just the way I am. My feet are buzzing, my legs are buzzing. Not only in excitement for witnessing, experiencing all of you, but for what's coming from you to me.
I have the image not only of the roots of the tree, but also the mycelium. I don't know if you've seen that fantastic fungi documentary, but we're like this system is the communication system of the earth, and all of us individually are part of this system.
I'll
And-
read Jean again.
Hmm.
Your physically felt body is in fact part of a gigantic system of here and other places, now and other times. You and other people, in fact, the whole universe. This sense of being bodily alive in a vast system is the body as it is felt from inside.
It would be wonderful if you could put that in the chat too, Lynn. That's such a beautiful quote.
Okay. Yes, Steph. I will.
It's a whole different way of listening and speaking and being when we are in contact with that connectedness, and it isn't so much about the content. The content is very important as a signal, as a communicator, but it's so much deeper than the content. So in the breakout rooms, I think that whatever you're talking about, it's more about what you're talking from.
It's exactly that, Lynn. Thank you so much. In whole body focusing, those of you who've worked with Kevin, you can let me know if I'm going off someplace. It's not that we never reflect what the speaker has just said. It's that Kevin says, and he said this many times, which is the only reason I can remember it. And this is a visual, so please watch me. He says, I don't know what I'm going to say, but my body does. And that, I remember in the beginning when I was an early focuser, listening by telephone, I wrote down everything the other person said because I was so thinking it was important to be able to say back what they said, and maybe I would miss it. And my sense of whole body focusing is that almost that we're listening beneath the words, that we are taking in the, I don't know, the tone, the whatever this gesture means in you. And also, as Jean says, he came to some of the summer schools for a day, and he was doing a demo with someone, you know, Jean sitting slouching, folded into his chair. And he was working with a young woman. She was speaking, and he offered a response saying, you know, is it like such and such and so and so? And she said, no, it's not like that. And he turned to us in his impish way and said, they'll always let you know when you're wrong. So responding from the all of you, see what it's like, experience what it's like, play with it. Since we're not in therapy sessions right now, where those of you who are therapists, other kinds of helpers you've got probably objectives that are different from being in a focusing partnership. So here you've got the freedom to let it be all about me. It's all about me right now. How I'm taking in and experiencing whatever I'm taking in and experiencing, and how I'm expressing whatever I'm experiencing and taking in. Shall we go to the playground?
You've invited us in such a delicious way. We're eager to play with that. So I think it's like 5 after 9, and we'll come back at 9:30.
Yeah, 25 minutes. Yeah, 24 minutes. Yeah.
I'll have 24 minutes and 3 people in a room. And so maybe 5 minutes for each person, and then a little time to talk in the triad about what the experience is like speaking and listening from this place. Does that
Well,
sound?
Actually, if it's your custom to speak one at a time in that way, you're welcome to do that. But it may also feel that you want to be more conversational. What Kevin and Karen Whalen call heartfelt conversation, which comes from this deeply connecting way. And how do I want to say this? Wow, Cassandra, maybe you can help me with this, because in our trio, we have a process of one person speaking and the next one that something might come from what the first person said that brings up something in you. So when you get into, how about this? When you get into your breakout, you'll have a little conversation about how you'd like to be together. Monica.
Hi.
Hi, sweetie.
I just want to share just because kisses to everyone, just because you said about the half-hour conversation, and I have been part of Lynn Preston group lately, and also about the living conversation. Or so for me, the living conversation of Lynn is exactly a heartfelt conversation in whole body focusing. So for me, it's not different. So whoever is not related with the heartfelt conversation is exactly what Lynn has been talking about lately, about having the risk to express from within whatever it comes you alive in the present moment in the interaction. So I thank you for pointing out, Lynn, because it brings me a lot of excitement in my body that there's many different ways to rephrase what is to be in presence to another person from the bigger system. Okay.
Thank you, Monica.
I'm excited about our doing the breakout rooms as a conversation. And I remember Jean saying, well, what makes a real conversation is when there's room for a pause or to ask the person to say a bit more about that. And this whole body perspective really leads us to that, to be able to pause.
When I'm teaching, offering classes in whole body focusing, I get people out of their seats, moving around, and then pausing, moving and pausing, so that there's a direct bodily experience of pausing, rather than pause being an intellectual concept, which, yeah, I know how to do it, but this is, I know how to be from it.
It sounds so inviting. I wish we could all be embodied in one space here. And
well, I'm feeling the presencing of everybody. Shall we go to the breakouts?
And dance, right?
And dance, yes.
right, we're ready.
Right.